Hello, my name is Kiara Owens, and today I will be analyzing the systematic review based on the standards set by Prisma 2019 checklist. The systematic review that I will be discussing today is called More Frequent Food Shopping May Promote Food and Vegetable Intake, and it was published by the Journal of Nutrition Education and Behavior in 2021. Throughout the evaluation of this systematic review, I will give you more details about the following sections of this review. Those sections include the background, objectives, data sources, study eligibility criteria, participants, synthesis methods, results, limitations, conclusions, and the implications of the research found. Although it is common knowledge that the adequate consumption of fruit and vegetables can decrease the risk of chronic diseases and improve diet quality, very few adults in the U.S. meet their recommended fruit and vegetable intake, with 12% of adults meeting their recommended fruit intake and 9% of adults meeting their recommended vegetable intake. Most of the consumption of fruits and vegetables tend to contain things that decrease its nutritional value, such as added fat and sugar. Several factors contribute to the low consumption of fruit and vegetables, including many aspects of the socio-ecological model. This systematic review aims to analyze the relationship between the frequency of food shopping and fruit and vegetable intake. It also aims to analyze the same relationship among participants of the Federal Nutrition Assistance Program. The protocol followed the preferred reporting items for systematic review and meta-analysis guidelines in the Cochrane Handbook. For the eligibility criteria, the studies that these researchers collected had to fall within the following categories. The studies were full-length manuscripts published in peer-reviewed journals before the date of October 2020. The study had to focus on adults between the ages of 18 and 65. It also had to be inclusive of only U.S. populations and have a sub-focus on Federal Nutrition Assistance Program. However, not all of them had to have this sub-focus. They also had to have U.S. specific influences on shopping frequency and examine the relationships between shopping frequency and fruit and vegetable intake. The last requirement was that the studies only included designs such as cross-sectional, longitudinal, cohort, and randomized studies. The information sources utilized in this systematic review include PubMed, CINAHL Plus with full text, Web of Science, and Cochrane Library. The search strategy was established in PubMed and then later adapted to other databases based on the resource restrictions. Articles were found using key terms such as eating, food preferences, food shopping, grocery stores, fruits, vegetables, consumer behavior, food shopping patterns, and feeding behavior. The data collection process involved two researchers collecting data from the chosen articles and inserting them into a template. The data collected included study designs, locations, sample size, and sample characteristics. For observational studies. The researchers included exposure variables and definitions, and for intervention studies, they included intervention groups and the duration of their studies. Some of the data items included in this systematic review were study design, location, sample size, government/nutrition assistance participation, length of follow-up, covariates, and outcomes. The risk of bias was assessed using the quality criteria checklist from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Sample characteristics and outcomes were summarized and put into a table where they were then synthesized. And additional analysis were the 14 studies that focused on participants of federal nutrition programs. The study selection was performed by 2 registered dietitians, both with advanced degrees, either a master's or a doctoral degree. Those researchers both handpicked the articles and screened their titles and abstracts to see if they were relevant to the topic. After the paper was selected, they were reviewed to determine if they met the credibility criteria. If there were any discrepancies between the researchers, a third researcher would come and resolve the matter. Study characteristics consisted of 88% of the studies being observational studies, meaning cross-sectional or longitudinal design, and 13% being experimental studies, being quasi-experimental design or custom randomized control trials. The sample size of articles originally was 61 to 7,298 articles, which was ultimately lowered to 24, and the article population was predominantly female and racial minorities. 14 of the studies, being 58%, focused on government/federal nutrition assistance participation and store types. This systematic review did not address any risk of bias within those studies. The observational studies consisted of 20 cross-sectional studies and 1 longitudinal study. Within the cross-sectional study, 15 studies found at least 1 positive outcome between their food shopping frequency and fruit, vegetable intake, and a positive association was also found with the longitudinal study. Studies within this systematic review displayed that grocery shopping 3 times or more a month increased fruit and vegetable intake compared to shopping only once a month. This information was provided by evaluating 24-hour recalls based on the Healthy Eating Index 2010. There were no risk of biases addressed within this paper for across studies. And additional analysis out of the 14 federal studies, on 4 of the studies found a positive association between more frequent food shopping and an increase in fruit and vegetable intake, and 5 of the studies found that there was no association at all. Out of the 24 articles studied, there were articles that showed both a positive association and no significant connection between the frequency of food shopping and vegetable and fruit intake. However, majority of the articles showed at least 1 positive correlation between frequency of food shopping and fruit and vegetable intake. Some of the limitations of this systematic review was the number of observational study designs and the heterogeneity of measures across the study. For example, the definition of food shopping frequency and the assessment of fruit and vegetable intake. To conclude, This systematic review showed that there is a positive association between food shopping frequency and food and vegetable intake, and no funding was sought out during this systematic review.